Hello everyone, Feeper here again, back with another video for you. Sorry for the delay on this one, I had a really busy week. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Dark Knight, the mascot for the new expansion, and we're going to see if it holds up to the hype that we saw in the trailer, so let's find out. As with the last videos, I'll do an overview of the offensive and the defensive aspects of the job, and then I'll go into my thoughts on how it plays and its strengths and weaknesses. The goal of the Dark Knight is to build up your blood gauge to spend on a nuke ability while managing your mana to weave in off global cooldowns for either extra DPS or extra mitigation. Your Soul Eater combo is your standard 3-hit combo. The second hit will give you 600 mana and the final hit will give you some healing. The mana you get is important because you're either going to be spending it on Edge of Shadow, a single target off global cooldown, or Flood of Shadow, a lion AoE off global cooldown. These each cost 3000 mana. You can also spend your mana on the Blackest Night, but I'll get into that more later. Carbon Spit is another off-global cooldown that gives you 600 mana and also has a pretty sick animation, and has a 60-second cooldown. Abyssal Drain is a great skill for dungeon pulls because it heals you for each enemy hit and only has a 60-second cooldown. Salted Earth is an AoE dot that you place in the ground. It lasts for 15 seconds and has a 90-second cooldown. Blood Weapon causes all of your weapon skills to replenish mana and generate 10 blood gauge for 10 seconds on a 60-second recast. And speaking of the blood gauge, you might be wondering what it's for. Well, you can spend it on 3 different abilities, each costing 50 gauge. Blood Spiller is a single target nuke, Quietus is an AoE nuke, and Living Shadow conjures a shadow of yourself that attacks on its own. Blood Spiller and Quietus are weapon skills, so they're on the global cooldown, where Living Shadow has a 2-minute recast. You can also use Delirium to negate all the costs for Blood Spiller and Quietus for 10 seconds and giving you mana back for each one as well. This has a 90-second recast. Oh, and before I forget, you have a 2-charge gap closer called Plunge. So, that's it for the offensive, now let's take a look at the defensive. In addition to Rampart, the Dark Knight also has access to Dark Mind, a 20% magic resist for 10 seconds on a 60-second cooldown, Shadow Wall, a 30% damage reduction for 10 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown, Dark Missionary gives you and your party 10% magic resist for 15 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. The Blackest Night, Dark Knight's coolest ability in my opinion, grants your target party member a shield totaling 25% of their max HP for 7 seconds, absorbing damage. If the shield gets popped, then it gives you the buff Dark Arts, which allows you to cast Edge or Flood of Shadow for no mana. However, the Blackest Night does cost 3000 mana as mentioned before, so it's not really free. This has a 15-second recast. And last up, we have Living Dead. This grants you the buff Living Dead, which prevents you from dying. If you drop to Fatal HP while under the effect of Living Dead, then you gain the buff Walking Dead, which will kill you upon expiration unless you are healed back to full HP. This is a 5-minute cooldown. So we're done with the overview, now let's talk about how I think it plays. When I was leveling Dark Knight, I was actually pretty bored. Only having 2 abilities that essentially are the same thing to spend your blood gauge on was not really interesting to me, and managing your mana felt more like a chore to me than fun. But once I hit 80 and got Living Shadow and had something else to pay attention to, the job got more interesting for me. I remember not enjoying leveling and then going into E4 normal and having a lot of fun. I think another thing that made it more engaging was having another tank to use the Blackest Night on. This forces you to always have 3000 mana in case you need to use it for a tank buster, where in dungeons I only really saw myself use it for large pulls. I definitely enjoyed Dark Knight more in the context of raiding than in dungeons. Speaking of the Blackest Night, I think this ability is super cool and super fun. Having a defensive cooldown that then allows you to do damage is really unique in this game, and there's some extra knowledge involved making sure that you know when to use it and know that it'll pop. It's great for main tanking, it's great for off tanking, it's just great in general, and it wins my spot for the coolest tank cooldown. I won't talk about Shadow Wall because it's basically the same thing as Sentinel and Nebula. It's a good cooldown, nothing more to say. Dark Missionary is good, but it's also exactly the same as Gunbreaker's Heart of Light. This doesn't bother me as much for Sentinel and Nebula and Shadow Wall because they're all like personal big cooldowns, but for a raid-wide utility, these two being the same just irks me. It feels lazy to me and I just wish they were somehow different. Hell, they even have similar animations. They're both giant yellow circles. Living Dead is not really that great, in my opinion. I think it's the weakest of the 4 like oh shit buttons. Holmgang has a shorter cooldown. Hollowed and Super both just outright prevent damage. Living Dead still causes you to take damage and then puts more stress on the healers, causing them to stop DPSing so you don't die. I think it fits thematically, but I think there are ways that they could make it better while still being unique. But hey, at least it's more original than Hollowed, but you drop to 1 HP, right? Alright, so for this next bit, I'm going to talk about Dark Mind, and I'm actually just going to kind of go off script here and just let my thoughts roll, because I don't like this ability. So I watched some other videos about Dark Knight, and one person was saying that the reason why they think that Dark Mind is a good ability is because A, there's a lot of magic damage going out in the raids right now, which is true, and B, that just because an ability isn't useful in every single situation doesn't mean that it's a bad ability. I kind of agree and disagree with that. I think that Dark Mind is sort of like this weird remnant from a past age. I think it's a weird remnant from older game design and from Heaven's Ward, when, you know, Warrior could do everything because it was just the best tank then. And Dark Knight kind of excelled with magic damage fights, and Paladin excelled with physical damage fights. It's just the way it worked back then. So I get that they want to kind of keep that identity, but it just doesn't fit anymore with how the game is designed now. You know, think about it. Is there ever a situation in the game where you're playing either Warrior, Gunbreaker, or Paladin, and for whatever reason, a situation comes up where you're like, damn, I really wish I had Dark Mind right now. Like, dude, if I had Dark Mind right now, I wouldn't have just died to that tank buster or something. That just doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. Warriors got raw intuition, and they could just heal the damage, or they could just vengeance, you know, and plus there's reprisal, there's shields, don't, you know, keep those things in mind too. There's other mitigation, not just the personal ones from the tanks. You know, Gunbreaker's got Heart of Stone, Heart of Light, Nebula, and Paladin is pretty much always going to have 50 gauge, just like stored up, so it can automatically 20% block anything. And it's got Sentinel and Divine Veil, or it could just probably eat it and then just heal it with Clemency if it really wants to, which, I don't know, probably not going to happen because of DPS, but like, you get the idea. You know, I just don't think there's a situation where you would... I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't think there's a situation where Dark Mind is really that useful because all the other tanks already have ways to cover that deficiency. Alright, so that's enough about Dark Mind. Last, I just want to quickly mention Salted Earth. I wish this ability had some extra effect besides just doing a bit of damage. In iBlueAir JGR's video about Dark Knight, he thought that, you know, giving it something like damage mitigation when standing in it or something would be pretty nice, and honestly, I agree. In WoW, I played a decent amount of Prop Paladin, and, you know, for Prop Paladin, the whole thing is you kind of like drop Concentrate on yourself, and that's like your area. Like, you know, it gives you damage mitigation when you stand in it, so you drop it down and you're like, all right, cool, this is where I'm standing. And so I'm a little bit biased, but I think something like that could be cool. Right now, it's kind of just like you drop it down, you forget about it. I think giving it some more interaction would be nice. All right, so that's my thoughts and overview. I know I spent a lot of time kind of bagging on Dark Mind and a little bit with Living Dead, but despite those two abilities, I actually like Dark Knight a lot. I think it's got really strong mitigation with the Blackest Night, and that ability is just super fun to use. Its DPS rotation is pretty engaging and keeps you on your toes. I'm not super into the RP of darkness, 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 but I still enjoy the job. Thank you everyone who's made it this far in the video, and if you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe, and also leave a comment discussing your thoughts on the job. I think for being the mascot of the new expansion, Dark Knight definitely delivers on a fun playstyle. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitch, where I'll be streaming my static raiding through Eden Savage, as well as some other games such as Monster Hunter World, and probably WoW Classic when it comes out, maybe a few others here and there. The link will be in the description. Next video will be about Warrior, and then I'll probably make a video talking about all the tanks and tanking in general, so be on the lookout for those. Thanks guys, and I'll catch you all in the next one.